Hello everyone, in this video we'll create an integration that will be used to create the AP invoices in Oracle ERP. So first of all, we'll see what are the connections that are required for this integration. So I'll go to connections and we need all these three connections which are ERP Cloud, FTP and SOAP connections. The connections are already configured. First of all, I'll open the ERP Cloud connection where you can see the role is trigger and invoke. If we create this connection as invoke only, then we cannot use in the callback integration, as the callback integration need the Oracle ERP Cloud adapter as trigger connection. Here you can see we have provided the Oracle ERP URL with one of the ERP username and password. Then I'll open the FTP connection where the role is invoke, and here we have to put the FTP server host address with port. Then SFTP connection should be yes. And under the security, we have to provide the FTP username with the password. The last connection is SOAP connection, which is the invoke connection. And here we have to provide the WSDL URL. Now we'll use this connection to call the BIP report from the integration to get the business unit and ledger ID. So for the WSDL URL, you have to provide the Oracle ERP URL followed by XML server / services / external report WSS service WSDL. Now if you want to find out these details, just search with BI report WSDL and go to first link. Here you will find this external report WSS service WSDL. Then we have provided one of the ERP username with the password. Now I'll go to integrations and create our integration. So I'll click on the create button and I'll choose schedule integration. I'll provide the name as INTG 027 as it is our 27th integration. I'll click on create. I'll make the integration as horizontal and in the schedule action I'll click on the three dot and choose edit. Here I'll add two schedule parameters which are file name and file path. So I created these two parameters which will be used to provide the source file name and file path from the SFTP when we'll trigger the integration. Now we need the FBDI file template of the AP invoices. So I'll search for FBDI template of AP invoice and I'll open the first link. I'll click on go to latest release and go down. Here I can see the XLSM template of payable standard invoice import. So I'll download this. After downloading the file, I'll right click and click on show more options. I'll choose properties. Now under the security, I'll check the unblock checkbox to unblock this template. Click on apply and OK. Now I'll open this template. I'll click on enable content. Now the template is having three tabs. From the first tab, we can generate the CSV file. The second tab is used for the AP invoices header and the third tab is used for the AP invoices line. So I'll go to the second tab and remove all the existing data from here. Now I'll copy the header with all the column names and paste it below. So basically we want to create the invoice header CSV file with the header in the first row. Now I'll do the same for the invoice lines as well. So I'll delete all the data and copy the header and paste it below. Now I'll go to the first tab of CSV generation. Here I'll click on generate CSV file. So multiple times you will get the option to save the CSV files, as two CSV files will be created and then a zip file will be created with the CSV files. You can see CSV and zip file has been created. So this is the zip file AP invoice import. You can see under the zip file we have two CSV files. The AP invoice interface is the header CSV file and the AP invoice lines interface is the invoice line CSV file. I'll extract this zip file to get both the files. I'll open the header CSV file and you can see in the first row we are getting the header. Similarly, I'll open the line CSV file. Here we can see the header as well. So these headers will be useful when we'll use the mapping in the integration. Now we have again opened the FBDI template that we have downloaded. So here all the columns are required where you can see the star before the column name. So for the invoice headers, the mandatory columns are invoice ID, business unit, source, then invoice number, invoice amount, invoice date. And in the supplier name and supplier number, you can see two stars. That means either supplier name or supplier number is required. Then again supplier site is mandatory, and after the supplier site all these fields are optional. Then the mandatory fields are invoice type, payment terms, and that's it for the invoice headers. For the invoice lines, we have invoice ID, line type, and the amount are mandatory. Now I have created the source data file using these all mandatory fields. So this is our source data file, AP invoices data. I'll open this. In this source data file, we have the data for the header as well as lines. From the invoice ID till payment terms, we have the header data, and line number, line type, and amount will use for the invoice line data. Now you can find this file in the description for your reference. Now in the integration, first of all, we'll read this file to get this data. Then using this data, we'll create our invoice header CSV file and invoice line CSV file. After that, we'll create the properties file that will be used to create the invoices from the interface. Now I'll open the WinSCP and upload this source data file into one of the SFTP folder. Then we'll go to OIC and read the source data file using the FTP adapter connection. So I'll click on plus and choose the FTP connection, which is FTP001. I'll provide the name as read source data file. Continue, continue. The operation will be read a file which is already selected. I'll not provide anything in the input directory and file name. We'll provide this in the mapping. Continue. Now here I'll upload the source data file structure. So for that I'll continue and click on drag and drop and upload our source data file. I'll put the record and record set name and go down. I'll make all the columns as optional and choose first column as mandatory. Continue. Finish. Now I'll go to the map of read source data file and I'll map the file name and directory. So in the schedule option, we already created two parameters, file name and file path. I'll map file name to file name and file path to directory. Now after reading the source data file, we have to create our invoice header CSV file followed by invoice line CSV file. So we have to use stage file action to create these two files. So I'll click on plus and search for stage file. I'll provide the name as write invoice header. Continue. Now instead of read entire file, we have to use write file. For the file name, we have to use this name AP invoice interface followed by .csv, and the directory will provide a dummy directory within OIC. So I'll put a name /AP-inv. So you have to remember this directory because the same directory you have to use for header CSV, line CSV, and the properties file as well. Continue. Continue. Here we have to upload the invoice header CSV schema that we have already created from the FBDI template, which is AP invoices interface. I'll provide record and record set name. I'll make all the columns as optional and first column as mandatory. Continue. Here we are getting some issue as we have star before the mandatory columns. So you have to remove the star from all the mandatory columns. I have removed all the star. Now I'll continue and finish. Now I'll go to the map of write invoice header. Now before the mapping, I'll open the source data file. And here we can see a particular invoice can have multiple lines. Like for the first invoice, test INV4, we can see we have 3 lines, 1, 2, and 3. So out of these 3 lines, in the header, we need only 1 line. Again, for the invoice 101, we have 2 lines that should be written as 1 line in the invoice header file. So to do this in the mapping, we have to use group by invoice ID so that only 1 line will be written for each invoice ID. So I'll go to the mapping and expand the record set. Now to use the group by invoice ID, we have to use for each group. For this, I'll click on the XSLT and search for each. So you can see for each group. Now before dragging the for each group, I'll create the target node for record. Now I'll drag the for each group in the record. So you can see for each group is created here. Now I'll expand the read source data file response from the sources, where we'll get the data from the source data file. So you can see the repeating element record. I'll map this to the for each group. I'll expand the for each group. So you can see group by. Now for the group by element, I'll connect invoice ID to the group by. Then I'll expand record. Now we are ready to map all the fields. Like we'll map invoice ID, business unit, source, invoice number, invoice amount, invoice date, supplier name, supplier site, invoice type, and we'll go down, and lastly payment terms. Now I'll validate this. Now we are done with creating the invoice header CSV file. Now we have to create invoice line CSV file. But before that, I'll create a scope and put all the actions within the scope. So I'll search for scope and cut these 4 actions and move within the scope. Then we'll create our invoice line CSV file. So I'll search for stage file and provide the name as write invoice line. Continue. Instead of read enter file, we have to use write file here. For the file name, we have to copy this file name AP invoice lines interface .csv. For the output directory, we have to provide the same directory that we have provided for the header CSV file, which is /apinv. Continue. Continue. Now we'll upload the line CSV schema. I'll provide the record and record set name. Now make all the columns as optional and first column as mandatory. I'll also remove all the star before the column name. Now continue and finish. Now I'll go to the map of write invoice line. Now for the line CSV file, we do not need any kind of grouping as we require all the lines from the source data file. So I'll expand the read source data file response and map the repeating element first. Then I'll map invoice ID and the 3 line fields, which are line number, line type, amount. Now remember, this invoice ID is the dummy invoice ID, and the invoice ID will be used to link between the header and line. But when the invoices will be created in the ERP, then the actual invoice ID will be generated. Now we have to create our properties file. For that, I'll go to Oracle ERP, and on the top right corner under settings and actions, I'll click on setup and maintenance. Here I'll go to task and click on search. I'll search for manage enterprise. I'll select manage enterprise scheduler, job definition and job set for financial, supply chain and related applications. Here I'll search for import payables. Enter. So you can see import payables invoices, which is the ESS job to create the AP invoices. Now I'll select this and click on edit. Now in the properties file, we have to provide the job package name, job definition name and all the parameters of this ESS job, so that after we upload our invoice header and line files, this particular ESS job will be automatically triggered using the properties file to create the AP invoice. Now this is the structure of the properties file. First of all, we have to mention the ESS job package name, then ESS job definition name, then zip file prefix, and after that you have to mention all the parameters of the ESS job, and the file extension will be .properties. You can find this file in the description for your reference. Now to store all these details, I'll create variables. So I'll go to the integration, and after the schedule action, I'll search for assign action. So the first variable I'll create, that will be job package name. So I'll provide v underscore job pkg, and the job package name will be this path. So I'll copy this from here and paste it within the quotation in the value section. Then I'll create the variable of job definition. So I'll put v underscore job definition, and the job definition of this ESS job we can find from this name. I'll copy this and paste it here. Then I'll create the variable of zip file prefix. So I'll provide the variable name as v zip file pref, and this is our zip file AP invoice import. So I'll provide this here. Then I'll create the variables to store all the ESS job parameters. But to get the exact parameters with the values, I'll trigger this ESS job. So to do that, I'll copy this ESS job name, which is import payables invoices. then click on the navigator. Now under the tools, you can see schedule processes. I'll click on that. Now I'll trigger this ESS job. So for that, I'll click on schedule new process and paste the ESS job name and press tab. So you can see this is the ESS job. I'll click on this, click OK. Now here I'll provide our business unit and press tab. So the primary ledger for this business unit will be automatically selected. The source will be external, and for the import set I'll provide some dummy value. The import set is nothing but the batch number which will be unique for each import. The rest of the fields will be as it is. Now I'll submit. So the ESS job is already succeeded. Now for the parameters, I'll go down and I'll expand the parameters. Now I'll expand all parameter values. So here you can see we need 14 parameters for this ESS job. So that is why in our properties file we have param 1 till param 14, and all the values will get from here. So you can see that most of the arguments are null, and for some arguments we have to pass some default value like n, 1000 and 1. Now to store this parameters value, we'll create some variables. So I'll go to integration and we'll create one variable to store the null value. So I'll provide v underscore null, and here we'll not provide anything. So this particular variable will be used for all the parameters which have null value. Now I'll create one more variable where we have provided the name as v not flag, and here I'll provide the value as n, because in some of the parameters you can see the value is n. Then we'll create more variables. So we have to pass argument 7 as 1000 and argument 14 as 1. So we'll create two variables for this. So v param 7, which is for argument 7, and the value will be 1000. Then for the argument 14 we have v param 14 and the value will be 1. Then we can see we need one more variable for argument 8. The value is external. So I'll create v underscore param 8 and the value is external. Now we are left with argument 2, which is business unit ID, argument 12, which is ledger ID. So the business unit ID and the ledger ID will get from the BI report. So if we open our source data file, then we can see we have a column business unit. We'll pass the value of this business unit to the BIP report and we'll get the business unit ID and the ledger ID from the BI report. But here we may have multiple business unit. Like in our source data file, we can see we have US1 business unit and UK business unit. So obviously the business unit ID and the ledger ID for these two business units will be different. So from the BI report, we'll get two different sets of BUID and the ledger ID. So in the properties file, all the values will be same apart from this business unit ID and the ledger ID. So as the BUID and the ledger ID is different for different business unit, that means we have to create separate properties file for each business unit. So in our case, two distinct business units are there. That means two properties files will be created. Now apart from all these parameters, we have one more parameter which is argument 9, which is the import set or batch number that will be unique for each import. So here we'll pass the integration instance ID. Now we'll get the distinct business units from the source data file and store those business unit in a variable separated by comma. Then we'll pass those comma separated values to the BIP report to get the ledger ID and the business unit ID for each business unit. After that, we'll create the properties file for each set of business unit ID and the ledger ID. So let's create the variable to store the business units. I'll provide the name as v underscore bu, and currently I'll put the value as null. Now to get the business unit from the source data file one by one, we'll use a for each. So I'll search for the for each and I'll select it. Here I'll expand the read source data file, and in the repeating element I'll drag the record. Now within this for each, we'll get the business units for each row of the source data file, but we have to store only the distinct business units in the variable. For that, we'll add a logic as if we are getting a business unit for the first time, then we'll store that in the variable, else we'll do not store that. And to implement this, we'll add a switch condition and in that we'll use content function. So I'll click on plus and select the switch action. Here in the condition, I'll click on switch to developer view. Now I'll go to functions and search for content function. I'll drag the contents function here. In the string 1, I'll provide our business unit variable, which is VBU. And in the string 2, I'll provide the business unit from the for each. So I'll expand for each and we can see the business unit. So I'll drag this in place of string 2. Now the condition will check whether the current business unit is present in the variable VBU. If it is present in the VBU, then obviously we'll not add the business unit again in the VBU. If it is not present, then we'll add that. So I'll click on the three dot and add a root otherwise. In the root one, we'll not do anything because it satisfies the condition that the business unit is already there in the VBU. When it is not there in the VBU, then it will go to otherwise section. Here we have to add the business unit in the VBU. So I'll click on the plus and search for assign. I'll select VBU here and here we have to concat the business unit with the VBU. So I'll search for the concat function and drag it here. In the string 1, I'll provide VBU and the string 2 will be the current business unit of the for each. For that, I'll expand the for each and put the business unit here. And after the business unit, we have to provide a comma within the quotation. So basically, the value of the VBU will be the current value of the VBU and the current business unit. So for the first time, it will be US1 business unit, comma. Then it will be US1 business unit, comma, UK business unit, comma. So we have to remove the last comma outside the for each. And for that, I'll add the assign action outside the for each. I'll select VBU and we'll use substring function to remove the last comma from the VBU. I'll drag the substring function here and in the string, obviously I'll put VBU. Starting location will be 1 and the ending location will be string length minus 1. So I'll search for the function string length and I'll drag this here. And within the string, I'll put VBU. Then I'll provide minus 1. So we are taking the substring of VBU from the first position till the length of the string minus 1 position. So that means if the string length is 10, we'll take it from 1 to 9. So obviously it will not take the last character, which is comma. Now save this. Now we'll call the BI report by passing these comma separated values of business unit to get the business unit ID and ledger ID. Now I already created the BIP report. So for that I'll go to Oracle ERP and click on this navigator. Now under the tools, I'll click on report and analytics. Now choose browse catalog. You can see this is the report, get BU ledger report, and get BU ledger DM is the data model linked with the report. So I'll edit this data model for the query. So you can see this is the query, select BU ID, primary ledger ID from fund all business units V, where BU name in P underscore BU parameter. So in this parameter, we have to pass the comma separated values of business units from the integration to get the BU ID and the primary ledger ID. You can find this query in the description for your reference. Now I'll click on OK and go to data. Here I'll provide US1 business unit, UK business unit and click on view. So you can see we are getting the business unit ID and the primary ledger ID for both these business units. Now I'll click on export to get the XML schema of this data that we need in our integration. Save it. Now I'll go to the integration and call this BIP report. So for that I'll click on the plus and search for the SOAP connection, which is SOAP 001. I'll provide the name call BIP report. Continue. Here we have to select the operation as run report. Continue, continue, finish. I'll go to the map of call BIP report and expand the body. Now under the run report, we have to provide all the details. So first of all, the attribute format I'll provide as XML, as we'll get the report in XML format. Then I'll go down. Then for the parameter name values, I'll provide the parameter name first, which is the parameter of the report and it is P underscore BU. And for the parameter values, I'll expand these values and under the item we have to provide the parameter values. that we have to pass the comma separated values of the business unit. So I'll map view to item. Then for the report absolute path, I'll go to the report section, click on the catalog and click on the more option under the report. Choose schedule. Here you have to copy this report name with the report path and I'll put that for the report absolute path. Save it. Lastly, the size of data chunk download will be -1. Now we'll get the report output in base64 encoded format. We can decode that using the OPEX schema or we can use base64 function. We already used the OPEX schema in our earlier videos. Now in this video we'll use the base64 function to decode that report. For that, first of all, I'll create a variable and I'll provide the variable name as v underscore report underscore decode and put the value as null. Then after the call BIP report, I'll use the assign action. Here I'll use this variable to store the decoded BI report output using the base64 function. So I'll choose that variable v report decode and in the function I'll search for base64. So you have to use this function decode base64 to reference. I'll drag this here and within the bracket in place of input arg will provide the encoded report output. For that I will expand call BIP report and here we can see report bytes. So I'll drag this here. Now I'll save this. After decoding the report, we have to read the report output using the XML schema that we have downloaded from the data model. So for that, we'll use a stage file. I'll provide the name as read BIP report. Continue. The stage file operation will be read entire file, which is already selected. Now here we have to provide the file reference of the decoded report output. So under the configure file reference, I'll choose the option as yes and I'll click on this switch to developer view. Now here we have to drag the variable where we have stored the decoded report output, which is v underscore report underscore decode. So I'll drag this here. Now continue. Now instead of CSV schema, I'll choose sample XML document. Continue. Here I'll upload the XML schema that we have downloaded from the BIP report data model, which is get viewlaser DM. Continue. Finish. Now after reading the report, we'll get the business unit ID and the ledger ID that we'll use to create the properties file for each set of business unit ID and the ledger ID. So for that, I'll create a for each action and in that I'll use the repeating element of this read BIP report to get each set of business unit ID and the ledger ID. So I'll search for each and I'll expand the read BIP report. Here we can see G underscore 1 is the repeating element. I'll drag this here and within this for each I'll create the properties file. So I'll search for the stage file and provide the name as write properties file. Continue. The action will be write file. Now we have to create multiple properties file. So the file name of each properties file must be different from each other. So for this I'll expand this for each and I'll provide the file name as buid.properties so that all the properties file name will be different and it will be based on the buid. So for this I'll go to functions and search for concat function. I'll drag this here. Now in the string 1 I'll put buid and in the string 2 I'll write dot properties, which is the extension of the properties file. I remove this. Now for the output directory, we have to use the same output directory that we have used for the header and line CSV file, which is /AP-inv. Now continue. Now here we have to upload the schema of the properties file, which we already created, and that is job details.properties. I'll provide the record and record set name. I'll make all the columns as optional and choose first column as mandatory. Continue. Finish. Now I'll go to the map of the write properties file. I'll expand the record set. So here for all the fields we already created the variables. So we'll create the map of these variables to these fields. So I'll map v job package variable to the job package name, then v job definition to the job definition name, v zip file pref to the zip file prefix. Now we'll go to ERP and under the schedule process we already ran the import payables invoices ESS job. where we can see argument 1, 4, 6 and 13 is null. So we already have a variable v underscore null. So I'll map this to param 1, param 4, param 6 and param 13. Then we have the value n for argument 3, 10 and 11. So for that we'll map v underscore not flag to param 3, then param 10 and param 11. Then I'll map p param 7 to param 7 and p param 14 to param 14. This param 7 and param 14 values are 1000 and 1, which we already stored in this variable. Argument 8 is external. So for that I'll map v param 8 to param 8. Now argument 9 is import set or batch number. For this we'll use the integration instance ID. So I'll map instance ID to param 9. Argument 5 is also null that we missed out. So we'll map v null to param 5. Now the last two mappings are param 2 and param 12, which are business unit ID and the ledger ID respectively. So for that I'll expand this for each and I'll map BUID to param 2 and primary ledger ID to param 12. Now we missed one mapping in the right header CSV file as well, which is the import set or batch number. So I'll open the map of right invoice header and go down. Here we can see import set. So that we have to provide integration instance ID. So I'll map this instance ID to import set. Now our invoice header file, line file and all the properties files are ready. Now we can create the zip file based on these files. So for that I click on this plus and search for the stage file. I'll provide the name as write zip file. Continue. Instead of read entire file we have to use zip files. The zip file name will be AP Invoice Import .zip. Now here we have to mention the directory where we'll find the invoice header line and the properties file, which is /AP-inv. For the output directory, I'll provide /AP-zip. Continue, finish. So after creating the zip file, now finally we can upload the file into Oracle ERP using the Oracle ERP Cloud adapter connection. For that, I'll search for the ERP Cloud adapter connection, which is ERP Cloud 001. I'll provide the name as import into ERP. Continue. Here we have to choose the second option, which is import bulk data into Oracle ERP Cloud. Continue. Here search for import payables invoices. I'll select import payables invoices. Continue. Now for the callback integration, we need to enable this callback checkbox. Continue. Finish. Now if we get any error in this integration, then we'll handle that using the scope fault handler. So for that, I'll click on the three dot of the scope and add the default handler. Now I'll add a notification in the default handler. So for any kind of error, we'll send the error details to email using this notification action. So here we can add three parameters, which are p error code, error reason and error details, and the value we got from the scope fault object. You can see under scope one fault object we have error code, reason and details, and in the body we have mentioned all these three parameters for the error details. Now the last thing is we have to add one primary business identifier that I'll add as file name. Save this. We can see one warning is there as we didn't add any action within this root one of this switch, but we can ignore this. Now I'll go back and create the callback integration. So I'll click on create and the callback integration will be an application integration. So I'll choose application and provide the name as intg028. Click on create. So for the callback integration, we have to choose the Oracle ERP Cloud adapter connection as the trigger. So I'll choose ERP Cloud 001 and provide the name as get import result, as we'll get the result of our AP invoice import. Continue. Now here we have to choose the second option, receive callback message. Now go down and search for the import payables. So I'll choose import payables invoices. Continue, finish. Now after using this ERP Cloud Adapter trigger connection, we'll get a zip file where we'll get the status of the input process along with all the output files. Now we'll send that zip file through notification. So for that, I'll add a notification action here. So here we have added the from email ID to email ID subject as AP invoice import result, and in the body we have written please find the attached file of the AP invoice import. So to get the file, I'll click on the plus under attachment and I'll expand the ERP import bulk data event, then ICS file, and under that we can see the file reference. So from the file reference we'll get that zip file. So I'll drag this under attachment. Now I'll add the primary business identifier that I'll add as summary status. Now save this. Now we are ready to activate and run the integration. So I'll activate both these integrations. Now we have to trigger only the main integration. The callback integration will be automatically triggered after the completion of all the process in ERP. So I'll run our main integration. Now here we have to provide the file name and the file path. For that I'll open the WinSCP and I'll copy the file path and put it here. I'll copy the file name as well and put it under file name. Now I'll click on run button. So I can see processing completed successfully. I'll go to ERP and in the schedule process I'll click on refresh. We are getting error here as we have missed out the mapping of the import into ERP action. So I'll deactivate and edit this integration. Here I'll go to the map of import into ERP. Now I'll expand the import bulk data and from the sources I'll go down and expand write zip file response. I'll map the file reference of the zip file to this file reference, and under the properties we have to also map the file name. So I'll map the file name under properties to this file name. Now I'll reactivate this integration and run again. You can see processing completed successfully. Under the import into ERP, I'll check the process ID. So for that, I'll view message process and we can see this is the process ID. So I'll copy this process ID and search it. I'll click on the hierarchy. So here you can see this is the first ESS job that is triggered, which is load interface file for import, which is succeeded, and it triggered the transfer file and the load file to interface. As we have two data files which are invoice header and invoice line, so that is why we can see load file to interface triggered two times. After the completion of load interface file for import, the data is uploaded to the interface and then the invoice will be created from the interface through the ESS job import payables invoices, which is also succeeded, and it triggered one more jobs import payable invoices report where we can find the report of this import process. Now I'll refresh again and you can see all the jobs are succeeded now. But if you notice here that the import payables invoices and the import payable invoices report triggered two times because we have two different business unit, and that is why two properties files have been created, and for each properties file the import payables invoices job has been triggered. I'll click on the import payable invoices report ESS job and you can find out the report here. So this is the report for UK business unit. Here you can see two invoices have been successfully imported. Now I'll click on the second import payable invoices report job and click on the output name. So this is the report for US1 business unit. If we go down, here also we can see two invoices successfully imported. Now I'll go to the integration and check whether the callback integration is triggered or not. So I'll click on the three dot of the callback integration and choose track instances. We can see it is already triggered, and here you can find the status of all the ESS jobs. Now I'll check the email to get the zip file. Now this is the email that we got from the integration AP invoice import result. We can download the zip file attachment. Now in the file name I'll provide the extension as .zip and extract this. So here you will find the log files of all the ESS jobs, and these are the invoice header and line CSV files that we have imported. And we can see two properties files are there, and the name of the properties files business unit ID dot properties. And we can see fail records AP invoice interface and fail records AP invoice line interface. So basically these two files are the header and line output files. I'll open the header result file, and here you can see we have 4 lines because we have imported 4 invoices. And if we go right, we'll find the status of all these invoices which are processed. I'll open the line file. You can see total 9 lines are there for all these 4 invoices. And if we go right, we can find the load request ID of this import. So this request ID is for the load interface file for import ESS job. So this is it for this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button, share this video within your circle. If you have any doubt or any suggestion, put that in the comment section and do subscribe our channel. Thank you.